If you've ever been to Six Flags Fiesta Texas, then you know that this park has one of the best lineups of roller coasters that everyone can enjoy. With 12 coasters at the park, well 11 that are actually running, it's surprising to know that only 3 coasters have been removed from this park. Coasters being closed, removed, or defunct are nothing new to virtually every park. However, these are some special cases. Of the 3, the most known is the RMC conversion of the RCCA Rattler to the best coaster in the park, Iron Rattler. But I can make an entire video on that one alone. And these other 2 coasters don't get talked about as much, as one was kept but never built at Fiesta Texas, eventually operating at another park across the sea, and the other is a truly rare coaster that can never be ridden again. My name is Avery, and this is United Coasters. To start the story about the coaster that was never built, we need to go back all the way to the year 2000. It's the start of the century, and Six Flags Fiesta Texas is about to debut one of its staples with its longest and fastest coaster at the park. Superman Krypton Coaster was the, and still is, a main attraction for Fiesta Texas. And although we can see how much this coaster has instilled a reputation at the park, another coaster was supposed to be built that very same year, so much that it was even added onto the park maps. Located in the back of Fiesta Bay Boardwalk, behind Frisbee, the place where Hurricane Force 5 stands today, is a nicely cornered piece of land that was set to be the plot of a new family coaster for the park, Boardwalk Canyon Blaster. This coaster was a large Tivoli model coaster made by German manufacturer Zier. If built, this new coaster would have been the second family coaster at Fiesta Texas, along with the park's first family coaster, the Pied Piper, a Vekoma Jr. coaster, which was added 8 years earlier at the park's opening. These Tivoli model coasters were common at the time, and Boardwalk Canyon Blaster would have been fairly similar to Cobra at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom, seeing that it's an exact clone of the coaster and layout. Going more into what it could do, I'm kind of surprised how much this family coaster would have had to offer. Granted, there's nothing truly awe-inspiring in its physical layout with the figure 8 formation, but this coaster is surprisingly long and looks to offer some great forces for a family ride. On top of that, the concerns for capacity on a family coaster would have been a non-issue, with its capability to have up to 40 riders per train with its 20 cars. Considering that Fiesta Texas only has the newly named Batgirl Coaster Chase and the Racing Dueling Kid Flash coasters as their offerings for families, I personally believe that Boardwalk Canyon Blaster would have been a much needed addition to the park. So despite having the available space and the coaster ready to be installed as it was stored in the employee parking lot for months, and having its location marked on the 2000 park map as new, why did Fiesta Texas choose not to build it? Well, it turns out that Six Flags over budgeted with the construction and opening of Superman Krypton Coaster. I know it seems like an oversight in the present, but at the time, this park didn't know how much this multi-million-dollar ride and park expansion was truly going to cost. Not getting into too much detail, the process of building Superman over a lake was a tedious one. The expansion of the park and many redesigns of the coaster led Fiesta Texas to make some big sacrifices in order to get what they could. That includes the removal of a 7th inversion on Superman and the decision to not build Boardwalk Canyon Blaster. And after a year of it sitting in storage, in 2002, Six Flags decided to sell it overseas to Park Warner Madrid in Spain, where it currently operates to this day as Tom and Jerry. And can I just say, I'm glad that this park has put it to good use and even has cool theming with the track going through the oversized orange juice and picnic basket. It's bittersweet that I and many park goers of Fiesta Texas never got a chance to ride it, but for the next defunct coaster I'll talk about, I'm kinda glad I didn't. Also, if you're enjoying the video so far, consider liking and subscribing. For the next coaster, we had to go even further back to 1996 to talk about Joker's Revenge. This rare coaster was placed in the back plot of Fiesta Bay Boardwalk, where the Gerstlauer spinning coaster Pandemonium currently sits today. Joker's Revenge was a Hurricane model coaster created by Dutch manufacturer Vekoma. The reason you probably never heard of this model is because there's only ever been one additional model made, that being the first one named Comet at Walligator Grand Est in France. Even though Joker's Revenge is a clone of its original, the Fiesta Texas coaster ran its trains backwards, making it truly one of a kind. There are 2 parts to this coaster that fascinate me. The footprint of this ride is in an oval shape, containing almost 2,000 feet of track and 3 inversions. You start by exiting the station backwards, rising up the 79-foot lift hill. After you drop down slightly off the lift, turning right and dropping into a vertical loop. You then rise to the right, undergoing double corkscrews. That part ends with you entering into a slow-moving helix before rising into a set of brakes opposite of the station and sort of meandering to the right back into the station. This coaster's duration is relatively short, and that may have been a saving grace, but we'll get more into that later. Because the other highlight I want to mention is the Q line. Joker's Revenge was built across Thunder Beach Speedway, now called Circuit Breaker Grand Prix, and uses the exact bridge that connects Pandemonium to the rest of the boardwalk. Its Q line was the most themed in the park, with a series of turns through hallways filled with lighting, special effects, and prints of Joker and Batman throughout. After navigating the Q, you're then placed above the station where you have to walk down a ramp to board the ride. There was also a chicken exit for people who chickened out before riding Joker's Revenge. For many, the Q was the best part of the overall attraction, as the coaster itself is notoriously a mixed bag of smoothness or janky transitions and uncomfortable restraints. The modern Vekoma roller coasters are a far cry compared to what they were in the past, and nowhere was that more apparent than on Joker's Revenge's layout. What I can only assume is that it suffered the same problem that Vekoma Boomerangs once had. Both coasters used the Aero-made over-the-shoulder restraints that were okay for taller riders, but created massive headbanging for smaller riders. Regardless, Joker's Revenge had a place in the hearts for many Fiesta Texas fans and looks like a solid addition to the park's newly accruing lineup, including the aforementioned Superman. But Joker's Revenge only had a 5-year stint at the park, as the coaster closed in 2001 and was dismantled and moved moved to Six Flags New Orleans in 2002, being part of Six Flags' failed ride rotation program. Fortunately, at Six Flags New Orleans, the coaster did receive a much-needed refurbishment, complete with a new color scheme and name, now called Jester, all while keeping the trains running backwards. Unfortunately, its operating tenure here was even shorter-lived than that of the 5 years at Fiesta Texas, as just 2 years later, the entire park at Six Flags New Orleans was flooded and destroyed by Hurricane Katrina. And yes, I'm aware of the irony that the Vekoma Hurricane model coaster was taken out by an actual hurricane. But surprisingly, the aftermath created only minor damages to Jester, primarily its lift hill and brakes, and there were attempts to revive this coaster to be included in a restoration for the entirety of Six Flags New Orleans. Sadly, that plan fizzled out in 2024 with the new plan to turn the land into Bayou Phoenix, a major sports complex with an indoor and outdoor water park. Going back to Six Flags Fiesta Texas, despite the removal of the coaster, the park turned the queue of Joker's Revenge into an actual attraction of its own. The Joker's Funhouse was used up until 2006 when Pandemonium was built in Joker's Revenge's plot. Even so, parts of it are still used during Fiesta Texas's Fright Fest as one of the haunted houses. For the coaster model, this is Vekoma's second and last attempt at a hurricane model, so I wouldn't be surprised if sometime in the future we see a modern approach to the layout with new restraints. And even though Joker's Revenge was short-lived, the character and history of its station and bridge is still experienced to this day. And I don't feel as bad as I could, since after giving the coaster to Six Flags New Orleans 7 years later, Six Flags salvaged their Batman clone and have it at the front of Fiesta Texas today as Chupacabra. Getting into both coasters today, before doing my research, I didn't know how much this park has changed over the years, and the rich history throughout it. And I'm guessing that's the same for some of y'all too. If you stayed this long in the video and found it to be interesting, why not leave a like and subscribe? It really helps. Oh, and also, if you have any input on these long forgotten roller coasters, or if you've been on Joker's Revenge or the Jester, I'd love to hear it in the comments below. Lastly, I just want to say thank you for watching, and remember to stay united.